Okay, this is kind of an interesting video. Well, of course, I wouldn't do anything but an interesting video. But this is about one of the good parts about growing old. Now, Sean Connery, who's one of my heroes, and I think even my assistants would know who he is from James Bond, used to say about life, and they were doing a special dinner for him. Well, the third act is usually shit, but this isn't so bad. And what I'd say about growing old is the wonderful part of it is old friends. And this is a tribute to one of my old friends, David Yolton, who was my college roommate at Stevens Point State College in 1962 when I enrolled. We were both from Madison, Wisconsin, and my first semester I was rather a rowdy young man. I came up there to be a wrestler and a football player, and I had no interest or intention of becoming involved in literature. As a matter of fact, I was so rough and rowdy that nobody wanted to be my roommate second semester until Dave stepped forward. And Dave and I became what they call friends of a lifetime. And he was a bit of an athlete himself. He wasn't as large or strong as I was. He was a football player. But somehow, anything that we would do, he would beat me. He could not beat any of the people that I would beat, but he always rose up to the occasion, and no matter what I would do, I could not beat him. That's sort of important to guys. But then that got me thinking of something else. Because at that time, I had an English teacher named Hazel Koch-Galena. And as I said, I had no interest in English courses or literature or anything. But it turned out that I was surprisingly good at it. I mean, I was like really good at literature and poetry. And that made me think of that magical year, usually for young men, where they can experience a kind of transformational cognitive development, where you're looking at something one way and something that you can't describe changes. It happened to me today. I'm trying to recover a poem that I wrote for the New York Review of Science Fiction about a Viking Christian cross that was intertwined in a town called Pickering in northern England. And then as I was looking for the poem and finally having to reconstruct it for my editor, I realized that I had used a phrase, "Stones and poems is all we have of them." Would we could get the stones to speak, just like the poems. And it's 56 years since I've read the poetry of Robinson Jeffers. And yet that poet, who I didn't realize was residing in some recess of my mind, came forth for me to write a poem, probably 10 or 12 years ago. And now, I recently took a psychology course from Dr. Matthews, Psychology of Addiction, and we started talking about neural pathways and physical neural correlations between areas of the brain and certain kinds of cognition. And as I look at that, if I look at that idea, I realize that many of my characters and myself as a writer are experiencing something like that. Now, this is a story within a story, and it's from my novella Philip of Traer, and it's about someone who's seeking skill memory. He's had one kind of a life, and now he has to come back and recreate everything he used to be. What he is now is he's a cloistered monk, but something broke into his life and changed everything. When I wrote it originally, he was 57. I guess he would be older now because I am. And it starts like this. My name is Alphonse. I have no soul. Almost as if in a dream. She came to me as if driven by the wind. She came to me last night in my monk's cell. Clara rent asunder in a single night of passion the fabric of 10 years of scholarship. She make the scholar's dance of realism and nominalism a jest, by which she asks. I wish you could see the illustrated version of this. It's beautiful. Who is Clara? She begged me to kill again. She begged me to do the work I had stopped doing when they found me bleeding, half dead on the steps, and gave me sanctuary 10 years ago. I used to kill men for treasure. Now she bade me kill that which could not be killed. I thought of all the brave young men who I knew who had tried before me to do her bidding, men whose empty eye sockets begged the noonday sun for mercy through the shattered helms, for none would bury them. Then my heart turned to bitter as I grasped that she had paid me as she had paid them the night before. I spoke to her like ice, and I asked her, who are you to send me men into eternal blackness? What sort of royal slut are you? She did not answer, but she cut me. I felt something hot and biting and searing, sharper than any razor against my cheek. And then I saw tiny drops of blood against my white linen shirt. Then my drops of blood were mixed with the salt water ocean of her tears. I blinked and she was gone. Now I was alone with no place to go. Who was I? Who am I? I was a scholar, and I am a killer. The world has changed so much. My feet and legs take over. They remember what my mind is not. Alphonse heard his own voice beating inside his brain in desperate reeling, building like a snare drum. So what I'm saying is you have a protagonist here who's trying to recover a particular sort of skill memory to complete the task that I've set forth him in this story. And now that I look at my work through this additional lens, the story makes more sense. Because in a sense, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to remember that I'm like Alphonse. I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I'm a creative person. And to be honest, this thing that I have written is better than any of the 20 episodes of Outlander I've watched with my wife. Now all I need to do is find somebody that will really publish it or make it into a media thing, and I can, after all, pay off my student loans. Well, Dave, I hope I gave you enough attention in all this, because I think I haven't really put together a bucket list yet. Oh, I remember one other thing. This is a story to sort of make your grandchildren smile. In a certain point of my life, I stopped being a wrestler, and I became something dangerous and monstrous. And one of the things I would do was sort of pro wrestler fight anybody in a party and throw them out of like a sumo ring or something like that. And it was what boys do at the time, and I guess maybe they probably don't do it anymore because they're kind of wimpy. But anyway, I had just thrown a guy out of the ring who was a professional football player. And David quietly snuck up behind me, took an empty bucket of Colonel Sanders Kentucky Fried Chicken bones, pulled it over my head and tripped me. So he beat me at that too. Well, David, I hope that we get together. I haven't made a bucket list yet, but I'd love to see you, and my friends would like to see you, and maybe you can get you to fund some of these productions. I'm not sure where we are at this point with this video, but I remember when I started my freshman year at Stevens Point, I quoted Ecclesiastes the part about when I became a man, I put my childish things aside. Well, 56 years later, and I still haven't. Well, this is Phil Caveney with my video production, and I think I'm going to wrap it up for today, and I'll be happy to do reviews, and we're going to ramp this thing up and try to monetize it, because I really believe in what we're doing. So I guess that's it for today.